Bakugan was one of the many shows that I watched as a kid, and there wasn't much that I remembered of it when I was a kid, but I just remember the vibe, like feeling like the characters were actually like real people, where they actually act like their age and stuff like that. And that's why I recently rewatched Bakugan not too long ago. Dan Kuso really surprised me as a character because the way he acts feels so real. Like his anger, his rage, not trying to like paint it as, just some like justified trouble kid, but he just reminds me like of a kid who can really get angry. He feels like someone who is a believable idiot, where you can actually see a kid making these idiot mistakes. Not in the same way where it's like Naruto or Luffy or Goku or any of those guys where they're comedically an idiot, but with Dan, he feels realistically an idiot when he makes these idiot decisions, but not in a way where you would call him retarded or anything like that. Not in a way where you would like think like, how is he this stupid? It's in a way that's kind of entertaining and actually, makes the story more entertaining in general. And obviously he grows from this, but in later seasons he becomes more of your average shonen protagonist, where it's like that's when he becomes more like Goku, Luffy, and Naruto and all those characters. But in season 1, he's mostly your average normal kid, right? And he genuinely feels like a kid, and he has this nostalgic feeling to him that I just really liked seeing in Bakugan. And what really interested me is just how much of an asshole this character can be. And nothing really highlights that more than his first arc when he had to actually work with Drago and when they eventually became a team. Season 1 of Bakugan genuinely feels like it was written by people who understand human emotions, emotional intelligence, and how people will react and stuff like that. And just basic common sense in what is going to be said and how a character might feel and what they're going to say.
I'm the man.
Ha! You're a boy.
Hey, it's great that you can talk, but be nice. I gotta be ready to beat Masquerade. That means I have to concentrate. So cool it on the wisecracks, okay, Drago?
Are all humans as impulsive as you? If so, I think it would be better if you left this battle to me. I know you want to defeat your opponent, but there is more at stake than you realize.
What's more important than winning? Humans. When it comes to Bakugan, I got mad skills, and I know I can easily be number 1. I'll prove it the next time I cross paths with that clown Masquerade. He thinks he's a champ, and I'll make him a chump.
You are blinded by your anger.
I'm not.
Listen to yourself.
Okay, that does it. Hey, all right!
And you can spot this in the first few episodes of Bakugan when it comes to Dan Kuso and Drago's relationship. And that's what really got me hooked on rewatching it for the first time in like, I don't know, maybe 15 years. It's probably around that time frame. I'm 23 years old now, so I know it had to be a long time because I watched it from a young age. But that is besides the point. The point is that one of the first things that Dan really needed to learn as a Bakugan brawler when he first got his Bakugan, or really when he first got Drago as a Bakugan, is that he needed to learn strategy and he needed to learn to actually treat Drago and other Bakugan as human beings, because these things are life forms.
Okay, sure, I was a little gung-ho at the start, but I learned my lesson. This is no time to argue, let's celebrate, okay?
You want to celebrate after everything that's happened? What about the friends I lost today?
Hey, if I could bring them back, I would.
You don't understand, Dan. They can't come back.
All Bakugan are alive, but the ones that fall into the Doom Dimension are gone. They will never return.
They are as living as human beings are living. And so he really needed to stop treating his Bakugan as toys. Because of the way Dan was acting, at the early episodes in the series, Drago actually needed to suck up to him and actually just do everything he says, so they can get along. Now, this is understandable because once again, Dan is just a simple kid, but normally like a main protagonist or your average protagonist would just listen and just be the average and good protagonist. But when it comes to Dan, he's like, no, I'm not tolerating your bullshit. If you keep lecturing me, if you keep doing all of these things, I am going to just leave you there because I don't have time to be bossed around. He doesn't want to listen to anything that Drago says, even though it's important. Now, Drago at this point of the story really needed help. He had just came from Vestoria because of the events that happened with Naga and because of Hal G. They are the reasons the Bakugan turned into these toy-like figures, and now they're also the reason why these children are playing with them like they're children's child's games.
Exodia! Obliterate!
And they've also been turned into these cards where you can actually perform Bakugan battles on. But anyways, because of this, Drago really has no choice but to suck it up to Dan, and this kind of does work for a little bit. They seemingly become great friends and they seem to be getting along, but eventually Dan makes a mistake that Drago just can't ignore because it would have cost him his life. He was fighting this guy called Rimiki or Rimiku, whatever his name was. It was obviously a trap that this person was setting up, and Drago knew this, and he tried to warn Dan, but Dan wouldn't listen, so Drago had to actually act himself and make choices himself so he can save himself from dying. A little bit of a tongue twister right there, but even though because of Drago's decision they win, it still doesn't change the fact that he easily could have died. And by dying, I'm talking about getting sent to the Doom Dimension. The Doom Dimension, the Doom Dimension, the Doom Dimension, the Doom Dimension, the Doom Dimension is a card which can send you to the Doom Dimension, and you can't really get out under normal circumstances. Masquerade, who is giving these people these cards to send these Bakugan to the Doom Dimension, is one of the main antagonists of the series. And he literally tells Dan when they fight that
Bakugan is not a mere game, kiddo. There are other dimensions and powers involved. It's a battle that can lead to the destruction of the entire world.
For real?
And the only way to stop it is for you to defeat me.
This is crazy.
that's his warning, and even with that, Dan is still being a reckless moron. So far, he's just been carried by Drago, and he's just brute forcing his way through enemies. That is not how you play Bakugan. It's a strategic sport, kinda, in a way. And if I'm gonna be serious, he would be pretty destroyed in Dragon Ball Legends, just say. Now, moving on from that, like I said before, Drago was pretty much calling out Dan on his bullshit. And I want you to listen closely to how Dan responds to what Drago is saying.
Perhaps you're so intent on defeating this masquerade that you don't realize how reckless your actions are. It's obvious to me the Bakugan are just a game to you and nothing more. I had hoped that you were different, but I can't trust you.
No, that's not true. I can be trusted. We're a team, right? We work together. You remember the day we made that deal? I don't know what you're getting so wound up about. I've been straight with you all along.
Sure, there's still things I don't understand about the Bakugans, but that's no reason to give up on me. I get totally pumped every time we take on a new player, and you should too. Don't bail on me now. We can do this. If you want more say in what goes down, you got it. But you better make sure you're right. Like if your little trick on the battlefield hadn't worked today, then where would you be? You'd be toast. Done for. This is twisted. I thought you and I made a wicked combo, but now it sounds like you want to go solo. Well, I won't stand in your way, Drago. If that's what you want, then I guess our deal is done. It's over!
So long, buddy. We're finished. It was nice knowing you. But this is goodbye. Goodbye forever!
Dan pretty much decides to, start by acting as if he doesn't understand what Drago is saying. Or he may just be genuinely confused, but then he switches to defense to say like what he's done and how he has helped out Drago. And then he pretty much, tries to get Drago on his side again by saying that, he'll listen to what he says from now on. But then he quickly switches up and then in a way kind of dances around trying to shift the blame to Drago and says that if he was wrong, then what would he have done? He would have been sent to the Doom Dimension. But we all know that what Drago did was justified and his thinking made sense to do. What he did was based on logic and strategy. So there's no real reason to actually, use that argument. But I think what Dan is trying to do here is try to make it seem like it's less his fault and it could have been anyone's fault. I honestly think that's such a 12-year-old thing to do. Now, I can't remember exactly the type of logic I was using when I was 12 years old, but I feel like that kind of thinking was in my head when I was 12 years old or younger. And I'm pretty sure a lot of us here watching this video are actually grown as men, but I think when we were younger, this is the kind of logic that we would use when we were in trouble and we tried to make it seem like it wasn't that bad, or we try to make it seem less our fault. Anyways, Dan pretty much just says that they're done and he throws Drago into the river, which is a pretty asshole thing to do. Genuinely, after watching this, I think I realized that I really do like asshole characters.
Tell this asshole
In some degree that, aren't just goody two-shoes and won't make mistakes. Obviously, there are goody two-shoe characters that make mistakes and stuff like that. When it comes to majority of main characters, they don't really do stuff like this. So I guess it's much less me, enjoying flawed characters and more about me liking main characters that are pretty much assholes, because if it's done right, it can be pretty entertaining. So in the very next episode, Dan, when he is in school, he notices one of his classmates, Lyle, talking about Bakugan and how it's not just about brute forcing your way through a battle, but it's also about strategy. And as we discussed in this video, strategy is important. And so throughout the whole entire conversation, Dan is kind of blown away. He's actually shocked because he realizes that this is what Drago was doing. And in a way, he kind of takes offense to this, because if someone who doesn't really do Bakugan, because Lyle isn't actually doing Bakugan, he's just using this device to simulate Bakugan battles, then in that case, what does that say about Dan as a brawler if he's just recklessly doing things and he's not actually using strategy? So one of Lyle's friends riles up Dan by saying that he might actually be able to beat him by using strategy, and Dan obviously doesn't take well to this and kind of borderline bullies the guy by, coming up to him, trying to intimidate him, or at least it looks that way. But when Lyle falls down, and I know that's not even his name.
This is me from the future because I forgot to bring all this stuff up. And I proceed to say Parker, so yeah, I really don't care about what his name is at this point, but
He causes Parker to fall down, which could have broken his computer, but Dan, realizing the situation, just leaves the room. So I wouldn't say he was bullying, but it almost was borderline bullying. But Dan's realization at the end kind of saved him from looking even more of a douchebag than he already was looking. So the very next day, Parker pretty much beats Dan and Bakugan and shows him the error of his ways.
I was totally helpless to save them. I lost Terracon. I lost Juggernaut. Battalion.
And then after this, Dan finally realizes what he was wrong in and gets Drago back, and they have a heartfelt apology. Mainly Dan, but Drago does take some of the blame as well. And I mean, I'm not saying that it's his fault. I'm saying that he himself blames himself for being too hard on him. And me personally, I don't think Drago was really in the wrong, but I can see why he would feel that way, because at the end of the day, Dan is a kid and he's probably realizing that he just doesn't understand, certain things because of his age. And I think it's good to go over why Drago said that he was being too hard on Dan. Because I think that when Drago said what he said, I think he realized that the way that he said it was more like he was done with Dan rather than giving Dan another chance. Honestly, I can see why Drago would feel that way in that moment, because it's like you see this guy that doesn't care about you, he's just using you, he's not listening to you, even though you could be sent to the Doom Dimension, which you're stuck there forever. So it's not hard to see why Drago would resort to saying, I can't trust you anymore. But at the same time, even though I wouldn't put Drago at fault, if he had said it in a way where he was still harsh but gave Dan another chance, then maybe Drago himself realized that Dan would be more accepting and, be more willing to change. So Dan eventually sees Parker again. He lets him know that he is sorry and he apologizes for what he did. He wants to let Parker know that Masquerade isn't really someone you should be associated with. Parker, recently being more arrogant than usual, he challenges Dan again, and this time Dan has Drago with him. But that is not going to be the reason why Dan wins. It's going to be because of strategy.
He snuck a Mind Ghost card in ahead of time, which takes out either an enemy or a friend.
I see. So he was going to sacrifice Mantris, who he was finished with, in order to take one of his enemies with him. And you used the card in reverse. Good thinking.
Well, you see, Bakugan is really a strategic game. You have to read the opponent's mind and anticipate his move.
And Dan wins because of strategy. These first few episodes of Bakugan are really good at teaching you the fundamentals of Bakugan in a way, if you're, watching the English sub, because I heard that the English dub doesn't really represent it that well. It's also really good character development for Dan, right? Like, it really makes sense to make this character really flawed based on how the game works, because by having the main character be reckless in how he does Bakugan, but then having him develop into someone who is better at Bakugan simply by being more careful and more strategic, it shows that that is the way that Bakugan is meant to be played, and it helps people understand how Bakugan is meant to be played. Now, even though I'm not trying to make Dan out to be this complex character, I do want you guys to understand that obviously it's easy not to make a character some goody two-shoes, right? It should be easy to make a character have flaws. With Dan, they could have easily made it so that he was someone who can adapt easier and actually listen to people easier. And that's what many characters or many main characters with flaws do. Like, they'll have one lesson learned, and then once they are taught that lesson, they will learn it. Or, someone will say in the moment, like, hey, don't do that because of so and so, and then they'll listen on the fly. But with Dan, it takes a while for that to set in, and that doesn't usually happen for a main character. But I'm glad that it happened for Dan, because it just makes him more relatable, it makes him seem more realistic, it makes him seem like an actual knucklehead, like an actual real life kid who's a knucklehead and who takes a while to listen to what people are actually saying. Like, if you were a knucklehead when you were in elementary, if you were a hard-headed person, I think Dan would remind you of yourself from back then. That's how realistic he feels. Now, if you enjoyed the video, then please get this video to at least over 100 likes. And even then, know that I'm going to actually make a video on something else before I make another video on Bakugan. As there is more to explore with Dan's character, because his rage is just so entertaining in the way it's done. But Bakugan isn't the only thing that I'm going to be talking about on this channel, because that's not what I want to rely on for this channel. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day.